that are faster. Even Lunala is really close in speed to the Charizard there. If you are able to Electro Web those opposing Pokemon that would be faster, now you have both the speed advantage and the bulk advantage because you're investing defensively into it. So that's one, a potential option for Wolfe in this matchup with Regieleki. He could really help him win the speed war.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because when I was talking to Santino after his win earlier on stream, that was one of the first things he called out was that his team has it trouble. I mean, it was a Kyogre matchup back then, but knowing that your opponent had consistent speed control via the Tailwind was just something that he really struggled to face, and I think forced him to bring the Venusaur in that situation for that matchup. Going into this match, yes, Venusaur could still be an interesting option, but if this Regieleki is able to forego the Electro Web and go for a Dynamax and possibly use Max Strike as a form of speed control, and then you can also set up Electric Terrain. Sleep Powder then is no longer concerned, and you can kind of play through that board state a bit easier.
So here we are in round 7. Wolfe, Glick, and Santino. Tarquinio, two of the top trainers in North America. Santino really made a name for himself in the online era with those Players' Cup performances. Can he bring it here IRL against Wolfe?
Well, it's certainly an interesting start to this match with Groudon and Grimmsnarl out on the field for Santino. Wolfe bringing out the Charizard and the Incineroar, which is a very good call from Wolfe, as that Charizard will be able to take advantage of the sun that Groudon brought out on the field, get that solar power attack boost that we've seen them use very, very well throughout the start and the middle and the current point in the VGC 12 metagame, and possibly start the game off with some incredible G-Max Wildfire damage with this Dynamax.
I always think that's a fun little mind game on turn 1 where both trainers have, a Charizard or a Fire Attacker and Groudon. It's like, all right, well, do I bring my Groudon or do I bank on my opponent bringing the Groudon to set the sun for me? You can do the same thing with Venusaur, obviously, or any type of, weather attacker.
Yeah, but it looks like it's a double Dynamax here, and I think this is going to be an interesting turn 1, not only because we're seeing both these trainers go for the Dynamax, but how Groudon is going to target down this Charizard, and the Charizard's item choice are going to be key. A lot of Charizard were running Charty Berry to half Rock-type attacks going into this tournament. Whether or not that's still the case, we'll have to see.
The fake out from Incineroar goes into Grimmsnarl here, as that's the correct choice since Groudon did Dynamax. That fake out would not have mattered. But here's a G-Max Wildfire in the sun into the Grimmsnarl, and no light screen because he got faked out there. So that is going to be a clean knockout. And now with the G-Max Wildfire effect, remember, Groudon's not a fire type anymore. It was forever in the GS Cups 2016 and 2019, but now he will be affected by the Wildfire for the next couple of turns. Here's a Max Quake into Incineroar, but thanks to the Shook Berry, that actually doesn't even do half to Incineroar.
Boosting the special defense of that Groudon will help out against this Charizard long term, but it's only a matter of time before these G-Max Wildfire boosts will sort of cover for the fact that it's defense that it's not dealing damage to that Charizard. But still, a great turn for Wolfe. I think getting rid of the Grimmsnarl does mean that you're a bit freer to play through this matchup, and again, sort of forces the reveal of the Venusaur here. Venusaur, because it is boosted by the sun with its speed, that Chlorophyll ability, puts Santino in a position that's similar to his earlier match on stream where he kind of has to go for the Sleep Powder. Sludge Bomb is not going to deal a lot of damage here. It's possible that this Venusaur has like an Earth Power or something to deal more damage, but realistically speaking, Santino, I think, needs the momentum from a Sleep Powder.
Oh, he avoids! Charizard does not get hit by the Sleep Powder, so that is going to bring the Venusaur down to its Focus Sash. The Incineroar did switch out on Wolfe's end as well, so that'll be the only attack for it on this turn. So it's up to Santino and his Groudon if he has access to Max Rockfall or continued with a Max Quake. This will be going into the Groudon slot. Would have been targeted for the Incineroar, but instead the Groudon takes that really well. And as the G-Max Wildfire starts to rack up, it's going to knock out the Venusaur, hit the Groudon for more, and then look how healthy this Charizard still is.
Even with the solar power damage, damage. That is the only damage it's taken so far in this game, and I think that's ultimately Santino's downfall here. I think that setting up the special defense boost on the Groudon is a great idea if you're assuming your opponent's last Pokemon is Lunala, as it is a special attacker, and especially with a Pokemon like Calyrex Shadow Rider, you know, you want to have that extra assurance that you're going to be able to take at least one Moongeist Beam. Unfortunately for Santino, though, being forced to pick that Max Quake earlier on just meant that in the current moment, Charizard was free to go for those attacks. And while it's unfortunate that the Sleep Powder missed, I feel like that's only a move that you go for if that is your only out. And unfortunately for Santino, it just did not work out in that case.
And a lot of times, if that is your only out, even if you get it, it still shows that you're in a really difficult position. So even if the Sleep Powder did connect, that doesn't necessarily mean that it would have brought Santino so well back into the game. But the Max Airstream goes into Calyrex's Protect that turn, so it only does a quarter of the intended damage there. And then Precipice Blades from Wolfe's Groudon will connect into the Groudon on Santino's end. Not doing much. Finally, here's the Max Rockfall. I did not see a gigantic berry being consumed, meaning it is not Shardy Berry, meaning that Charizard has been knocked out.
The Unnerve ability from Calyrex could have meant that Charizard was unable to eat that berry, but that could have also just been good timing from Santino, you know, waiting until the Calyrex was out on the field before going for that attack. And but I think really this Charizard got all that it wanted out of those 3 turns of Dynamax. It was able to outspeed the Calyrex Shadow if it had gone for an attack that turn. It got the G-Max Wildfire to connect and get a knockout. And it also got an Airstream for Wolfe's Groudon, which if it is slower than Santino's Groudon on paper, that really could be huge, as now it's definitely faster. Still going to have to worry about that Shadow Calyrex, as I think Groudon needs 2 or 3 speed boosts before it could theoretically outspeed one of those. But knowing that Wolfe has that Incineroar still available to him, if that Incineroar has the Dark type attack, I think you just go for Precipice Blades, you go for the Dark type attack, maybe try and flinch the opposing Groudon if you just want like one more turn to figure things out, and then you're able to clean this up without revealing your last Pokemon, which is huge. I mean, we've seen how much the information game has an impact on these types of matchups where you're having 2 world champion quality players playing against each other.
Absolutely, that would be, you know, it's a big, especially a game 1 of a set is a big information reveal. So if Wolfe can keep secret who his 4th intended Pokemon was, that would be a big deal. But the fake out, Precipice Blades connecting, Calyrex gets knocked out, Groudon down to around 30% of its HP. It will be flinched because it was fake out at this turn. So is the Wildfire going to get it? No, it actually hangs on with just 4 HP, but we are 4 HP away from Wolfe winning game 1.
Groudon was also able to outspeed the Calyrex Shadow Rider. So again, that is a key piece of information for Santino going into game 2, and that's definitely something he's going to have to keep an eye out for, as Precipice Blades is the move of choice to clean up this match.
Love when you can just click the Precipice Blades because you know it doesn't matter if it hits or misses anyway, so you just feel good that it connected on that turn. So Wolfe with a pretty commanding 1-0 after that game because he didn't even reveal his 4th Pokemon. A lot of times you would assume it'd be that second restricted pairing in the Lunala, but of course you can't know for sure, so that's a huge advantage for going into game 2 for Wolfe.
It is. I think Santino can make the assumption pretty safely that it was that Lunala. I mean, it's possible that maybe Wolfe brought the Gastrodon or I don't think you bring the Regieleki, to be quite frank.
Right, yeah.
So it's possible that it was the Gastrodon in the back of that party, but in game 1, especially when you're facing off against an opponent that has very similar restricted Pokemon to what you're bringing, I think it's pretty safe to just bring the Lunala, keep it safe in the back, and then hope that by the time it is out on the field, that Calyrex Shadow Rider has been knocked out. Going into game 2, you know, I think Santino had the right idea. I liked the Grimmsnarl lead. I think you kind of have to go with it in order to try and get up a Light Screen or a Reflect to sort of help yourself have that bulk against a player as good as Wolfe. But unfortunately for Santino, I think the initial knockout of that Grimmsnarl plus the almost immediate knockout of that Venusaur afterwards really just sealed the game, because there was only so much he could do with the Groudon and the Calyrex just stuck out on the field for him at that point. I think the adjustment you have to make is, 1, make a judgment call. Are you going to rely on Sleep Powder? Yes or no? If you're going to rely on Sleep Powder, I think you continue to bring that Venusaur and you just hope for the best. if you're not going to rely on Sleep Powder, which, like you called out earlier, may or may not have made a difference in that matchup at the end of the day, you leave Venusaur behind. Maybe you consider bringing your own Incineroar. That could be an interesting adaptation, get access to some fake outs. You can intimidate your opponent's Pokemon, and just, you know, have a Pokemon that's going to stick around for more than one turn.
Yeah, that was what was so detrimental to Santino's game plan in turn one, was he got Fake Out and then G-Max Wildfired, and all the supportive utility that Grimmsnarl can potentially bring to a matchup, he was just not able to utilize because he couldn't set up Light Screen, couldn't set up Reflect. So all of that full force G-Max Wildfire, he was taking the brunt of all of that damage. So here in game two, we do have an adjustment somewhat for Groudon Venusaur on Santino's lead, and then there's the Lunala on Wolfe's end right there paired next to the Incineroar.
I'm honestly surprised we didn't see a second Incineroar Charizard lead from Wolfe, as that would have been able to handle this Venusaur adjustment very nicely. You know, fortunately for Wolfe, he still has access to Fake Out, and a Moongeist Beam should be able to deal the remaining amount of damage to knock out this Venusaur, but if Santino has Protect available to him, this is a great opportunity to get some free damage down with your Groudon.
So, did Wolfe fall for the Protect there? In the Precipice Blades from Santino will connect out to Lunala, missing Incineroar, but Incineroar actually Flare Blitzed the Venusaur slot, making him think the Trick Room out of Lunala. Okay, so that's what Lunala was brought for the lead here in game two.
That's an amazing adjustment, because if you can't knock out the Venusaur before you can Sleep Powder it, you have to be faster. And there's two ways you can do that. You can Airstream, or you can Trick Room. And
he just protected.
And he just protected, which means this Flare Blitz from the Incineroar is more than enough to bring that Venusaur down to Focus Sash. Wolfe does have to double into it to ensure the knockout, but judging by how much damage that Precipice Blades did in the first turn, I don't think that's too much of a problem for him.
You will have that recoil damage from Flare Blitz into the Incineroar. Precipice Blades does connect onto both of Wolfe's Pokemon, so it brings Incineroar down to under half. He's not able to live.
Man.
Another one. And then the Meteor Beam from Lunala, so it's holding the Power Herb item, which lets you use a 2-turn attack in 1 turn. So you'll get the Meteor Beam, special attack increase, and actually activate the attack now. All you need to do is 1 hit point of damage to knock out Venusaur, which is exactly what Wolfe gets here. And now this Lunala under Trick Room is ready to go.
The Lunala's Moongeist Beam, it knows multiple beams, is going to be
It is beaming with energy.
It's beaming with energy. It's going to be a fantastic attack for it to rely on. Against this Incineroar on Santino's side of the field, I think Wolfe does have to be careful. As the Lunala is a ghost type, it will be taking super effective damage from a possible dark type attack, and most importantly, is already at half of its health. Now, if Santino doesn't have a dark type attack on that Incineroar, that could be something really fortunate for Wolfe in how this matchup is going to play out. We haven't seen anything yet in previous matches, but I'm not sure if Wolfe has that piece of information.
Wolfe switches his Incineroar out into Charizard, wanting to preserve Incineroar later. Obviously, there's 2 physical attackers on the field, so you can switch in again with Incineroar and get an Intimidate on. But Santino will Dynamax the Groudon here on this turn. There are a couple of turns of Trick Room remaining at this point, so it will be slower than the Lunala. Lunala's going to Protect, though, on this turn because he wants to find out, do you have a Dark attack going towards his slot? But a Flare Blitz into that slot will be unprotected. And then he tried to Max Quake, but the Charizard as a flying type switched in and was immune to it.
So that is the key piece of information here. Incineroar seemingly forced to rely on Flare Blitz there as the most amount of damage into that Lunala. As a result, it's possible Lunala will find the opportunity to get 1 attack in. This Groudon has Dynamax. We've seen from previous rounds, it's very bulky, so it's unlikely Lunala will find a 1-hit knockout even with that special attack boost. But that's okay. You know, you can slow things down. Wolfe still has plenty of Intimidates available to him, and you can give the Lunala enough time as a result to find those knockouts without relying on your Dynamax, which I think is also another important thing to note here for Wolfe.
Here is the Flare Blitz. Sun is still up, but it goes into the Incineroar switch in there, so that's a resisted attack, not very effective. Does bring him down into the red, though. And here's the Max Rockfall from Groudon on this turn into that Incineroar slot. A perfect switch from Wolfe, because the Charizard was such a gigantic threat looming on the side for Wolfe. It's like maybe he Dynamaxes, maybe he goes for a strong attack. I have to target that slot down. But what you did was you just left Lunala free to Moongeist Beam. It gets another attack potentially next turn as well if you want. So this Moongeist Beam at +1 special attack will be resisted into Incineroar though.
It will be resisted, but that does such a nice amount of damage. After the recoil and after this Sandstorm chip, Incineroar is at below half of its health. And assuming Wolfe's last Pokemon is the Groudon, and the Groudon's going to be coming out on the field to take advantage of this last turn of Trick Room, that could be within knockout range of a Precipice Blades, assuming this Incineroar is not holding a Shucca Berry as well. Even if Wolfe decides not to roll the Precipice Blades dice, you know, you can go for a Dynamax pretty safely here. Your Groudon is at full health. The Pokemon on Santino's side of the field have been intimidated very much at this point, and you don't have to worry about taking a lot of damage from a possible Max Quake on the opposing side of the field. So I think this is a great opportunity for Wolfe to choose Dynamax here if he wants to. That being said, I still think the Charizard in the back of his party is an interesting Dynamax option as well. You know, we are fairly late on into the game, so I'm not sure that the Gmax Wildfire would be necessarily as useful as it was in Game 1 here, but it's something to keep in mind.
It would be nice because there's one turn of Trick Room left, and the sun did just get reset. So if this Lunala goes down, you have the Charizard come back in when the dimensions are normal and the sun's up, and then you go for the Gigantamax attacks. That might be what Wolfe is opting for. Here is the Max Quake, though, from the Groudon on Santino's end, kind of preemptively getting those special defense boosts that he knows he's going to need once he faces down Wolfe's Charizard on both the Incineroar and the Groudon. Swords Dance from Wolfe, though, as well. We actually saw Aaron have Swords Dance on his Groudon earlier in the stream today, too. So Moongeist Beam, yet again, this Lunala has been half health against the Dark type for the last couple, like 4 turns, and has not been targeted at all. So your theory might be right about no Dark attack coming its way. The Twisted Dimensions return to normal, and Santino is out of Dynamax, and Wolfe hasn't even used his yet.
He hasn't, and I'm curious if this is the opportunity that you're waiting for and you take the risk of Dynamaxing the Groudon when you're at half your health. I mean, it comes down to speed, right? We've seen how these two Groudon have interacted. We saw the Groudon on Santino's side of the field move first, and then Wolfe's move second. It looks like he is faster.
Yep, Groudon will be faster on Wolfe's end. Precipice Blades connects onto both
so
the Santino's
damage.
Pokemon, knocking out Incineroar, bringing Groudon really low, so any attack that the Lunala would want to go for would knock it out. Is he going to get that chance though? Because Heat Crash, excuse me, in the sun is not enough, and Lunala actually goes for Trick Room again instead of just claiming the KO and knocking it out.
I mean, at this point in time, you have to wonder, does that make much of a difference? I mean, Santino's last Pokemon is the Calyrex Shadow Rider,
and
but
Charizard's slower than Calyrex.
But there's still that Groudon on the field. So as of right now, based off how we've seen these Pokemon interact, I think it's Lunala, then Santino's Groudon, then Wolfe's Groudon, then the Shadow Calyrex Rider. I think if Lunala tries to go for the knockout onto the opposing Groudon, you know, we haven't seen it use Protect. We can assume it's pretty bulky. And then if Wolfe is able to then connect an attack on the Shadow Calyrex, that's probably the win condition. But that's making a lot of assumptions about the speeds of these Pokemon on the field. And I like how Wolfe just goes for the Protect here to be safe, because I don't think you want to attack with your Groudon until the opposing Groudon is off the field.
Well, Wolfe did protect, so the Precipice Blades will not be hitting his Groudon, but it does connect onto Lunala. Lunala is fainting, so there will not be an attack from Wolfe's end of the field. On the side, and substitute. Hold on a second. That sub going in front of Calyrex will now mean that Wolfe has to waste an attack into the substitute to get rid of it before he can actually attack the Calyrex.
And this is the situation why you run substitute. If you find these turns where your opponent is just unable to attack for whatever reason, then you're able to attack yourself. You don't have to worry about Trick Room for a turn. You don't have to necessarily worry about how the speeds are going to all play out, because that substitute will take a certain amount of damage for you. Usually that first or second hit. With a Calyrex, probably just one hit, but it's going to take that for you, and that's really all you need. And as we see Wolfe go for that Dynamax finally onto the Charizard, I can't help but wonder, like, if you're Wolf, is your win condition you hope that Precipice Blades keeps missing and you double into that Calyrex slot to remove it? Or do you spend time trying to find a KO onto this Groudon and hope that you're able to deal with the Calyrex afterwards?
Also remember that those rock attacks are not 100% accurate. Stone Edge does connect, bringing Charizard really low. Precipice Blades avoids Calyrex. The sub will stay intact for Santino as Calyrex hangs on. And so you're going to need 2 more attacks again to knock it out. Groudon goes down. Here is the G-Max Wildfire, obviously enough to break the sub. Will have the residual damage every turn, so you know it'll eventually knock the Calyrex out. But the question is, will the Wildfire damage be, taken out before you could get it? An Astro Barrage there. That's exactly it. Double target there, and Santino has forced a game 3.
I mean, he got really lucky there with that Precipice Blades miss, as that substitute breaking would have been enough to give Wolf that
And then the Wildfire connects directly onto Calyrex instead of the sub. Okay.
Exactly. And there's no way that's not a knockout. I mean, the sun was still up on the field. Calyrex had already taken some decent chip. So fortunately for Santino, he gets one more opportunity to try and figure out this team. But I think if you're in his shoes, you can't take any risks. I mean, essentially, Precipice Blades gave you this opportunity for a game 3. You have to figure out how to play through this game 3 in a way that's going to be consistent, that's going to allow you to, have board control and have that pressure that you need. And again, I feel like we just have to keep coming back to this Venusaur and, what it's doing for Santino's team. I think Venusaur is a good Pokemon because it does force your opponent to focus on it. It forces your opponent to say, okay, this is how I'm going to get around Sleep Powder. This is how I'm going to play through this. And, we saw the Fake Out plus the Trick Room from that game from Wolf. Going into this game 3, knowing that you've been relying on that Sleep Powder pressure for these first 2 games, I think you have to just switch things up and leave it behind. It's a great option, and I think that it gave him a lot of power in these first 2 games, but you just need something consistent, and unfortunately, I don't think Venusaur is necessarily that Pokemon right now.
I also do want to note on Wolf's Lunala there, because there were about 3 or 4 turns in a row where Incineroar could have attacked it and didn't with a Dark move, so I think Wolf is pretty confident in seeing that the only way that you can super effectively hit Lunala is the Calyrex Shadow Rider on Santino's end. So what does that do for Wolf with his Trick Room plans, knowing that as long as Calyrex isn't out there, Lunala's relatively safe?
It depends on if you're okay playing this matchup where seemingly Santino's Groudon is slower. If you're okay with that, you set up Trick Room like every single time, because Calyrex Shadow Rider is such a crazy Pokemon that you have to have that speed control up against it. We saw this in Santino's previous matchup where his opponent consistently was like, here's how this Pokemon becomes faster than Calyrex. Here's how this Pokemon, outspeeds Calyrex. Like, this is the priority that I need to have in mind. And I think Wolf is in that position as well in this game. So you find a way for speed control. I think Trick Room is a great way to do it. You're not necessarily playing a Trick Room team, but you're using Trick Room in a situation where it benefits you, and because it's not your entire team, you don't have to worry as much about some of the downsides to Trick Room like we were talking about before this match.
Right, yeah, it's an option. It's not the core aspect of the team. I do think it's cool that in both games, Wolf has really utilized the full spectrum of the speed tiers by having the max airstream, and then his Groudon was faster than Calyrex in game 1, which won him the game, and then having Trick Room with Lunala in game 2. That can really be a tough mental game for Santino going into game 3, because it's like, oh, what do I prepare for? Do I prepare for a G-Max Wildfire and 2 airstreams and he's just super fast, or do I have to prepare for the Trick Room? Even though he didn't win game 2, he still had that nice little mental edge because now Santino cannot be certain what Wolf's game plan is for game 3.
Yeah, and I think the way that you play that situation is you assume that you're going to see the Incineroar as a lead again, because in both turns, with the airstream and with the Trick Room, Fake Out was really instrumental to getting those Pokemon the opportunity to set those things up. So maybe you bring your own Fake Out. There is that Incineroar on Santino's team that I think would be helpful in this matchup. I also think that you can consider trying to get that Grimmsnarl back out. You know, yes, Wolfe did focus in on that Pokemon in that turn 1 in game 1, but if you have maybe the Grimmsnarl and the Incineroar rather than the Grimmsnarl and the Venusaur, maybe that's enough that, you know, you have your own fake out. Maybe your Incineroar is faster. Maybe you can fake out the fake out user that Wolfe has.
Oh,
and then,
that's a risk.
Yeah, it's a risk. It's a
but
risk.
That's the game we play, Gabby. A lot of times you're like, is my Groudon faster? Is my Kyogre faster than theirs? You know, Zacian's probably full speed. Am I going to attack before the opponent's Zacian does? Like, sometimes, you know, as like, you have to take that risk if you want to move on, not just in the set, but move on to Top Cut and even become a regional champion.
I feel like I want to steal a saying of a good friend of ours.
I tried, I realized
you gotta buy a ticket to enter the raffle.
I was like, do I say it? But
I think you say it.
I'm happy we're in the same wavelength, though. So that was awesome.
Yeah.
So our players are fighting each other here in Game 3, so they're getting started up there. So we're finally able to get into that action. So Santino, Tarquinio, on the top of your screen with Groudon, Calyrex, Shadow Rider, and Wolfe, Glick with Charizard, Incineroar on the bottom of your screen.
Here I was talking about all these ways you can get around fake out. You know, you can bring your own fake out user. You just bring the ghost type Pokemon
That's
and
true.
You don't have to worry about it anymore. And, you know, that's the interesting thing about this lead from Santino is that it's very, very offensive. And I think this amount of offensive pressure is something that we haven't quite seen him find in this matchup against Wolfe so far. Yes, there still is that Charizard on the field, but if it is holding a Charty Berry, which again, we don't know what this Charizard is holding, but the unnerved Calyrex is on the field. It won't be able to eat that berry, and it could just be as simple as trying to connect a Stone Edge. You know, maybe not this turn, you know, you're probably going to be flinched, but next turn.
Yeah, for sure. And you know that if the Groudon switches in, because in Game 2, Wolfe actually did switch his Charizard out at one point, and you know take the attack into the switch in. Incineroar can't switch in, right? And you know the Groudon's going to take a strong attack, like if it was the Stone Edge or even a Max Rockfall in that slot. Like a combination Max Rockfall and Astral Barrage could be very scary for Wolfe to face.
It is, and quite frankly, I'm very surprised to see him go for the Gigantamax on this Charizard because of that. You know, this is definitely a gamble for Wolfe. I think that he has to be absolutely sure about how he's going to play out this turn. Otherwise, losing your Gigantamax this early on in Game 3 could be detrimental.
Yeah, that's definitely not what we want to see if we, in Game 3, the pivotal game. Remember, both of these players have one loss already. There's one more Swiss round in round 8. So if you lose here, you're in a really rough spot if you want to make it to Top Cut. So you want to ensure you get that victory and move on to the last round of Swiss with as much hope alive as you can. Dynamax Groudon, Gigantamax Charizard, substitute from the Calyrex. It was revealed last game. Charizard with the max Airstream into Calyrex. So that will break the sub. Calyrex had to sacrifice 25% of its HP to put that little substitute out there on the field. So we'll be back out if Wolfe did want to target it into the double target, say, into the Calyrex slot there. But it's a parting shot instead from the Incineroar. So not only did Wolfe intimidate it here on turn 1, but he is now parting shot into that slot. That's a -2 Groudon that is Dynamax at this point. So he'd be very tough to switch out.
It'd be very tough to switch out, but I think more importantly, this is how Wolfe is trying to get this Charizard to take a potential Max Rockfall, but Santino doesn't go for it. Instead, Max Quake into that Lunala does a ton of damage through Shadow Shield even.
I was going to say, is that a crit? Because through Shadow Shield, it had to be a crit. That's gigantic. That through Shadow Shield, Wolfe lost more than half of his HP on Lunala. Now Lunala, especially against Calyrex, who the dimensions are normal as far as I'm concerned, Calyrex is the fastest Pokemon, would be able to knock out the Lunala. But at this point, so let's say Wolfe brings Lunala in as a bait, right? You target Lunala, then I G-Max Wildfire that slot, so you can't really safely target it.
I mean, the nice thing about Calyrex Shadow Rider is if it were still on the field, it could just Astral Barrage and target both Pokemon, and you don't necessarily have to play that game. I think the key thing that I wanted to see here was the Calyrex, whether or not it was going to be faster or slower after a single Airstream boost. I think it would have been slower, which is exactly why we saw that Incineroar switch in. You know, just you don't necessarily need the Intimidate, but you need the bulk in order to, you know, deal with your Pokemon, all that.
Moongeist Beam from Wolfe's end into the Incineroar that switched in, though, so that was a fantastic switch out of Santino because you were able to do it. And there's the gigantic berry I missed so much. Okay, so it was the unnerved portion of Calyrex's double ability that stopped the Charty Berry from activating before. So that means that rock attack will have done, you know, less damage. And of course, he's had his attack drop 2 separate times in this matchup there. So Charizard really not too concerned about it. But there's no sun on the field, so this third turn of Gigantamax with the G-Max Wildfire is not going to get a drought boost.
And that's okay. At this point in time, I don't think Charizard's necessarily on the field to be dealing that big amount of damage. I mean, against a Groudon, you can attack neutrally with your fire-type attack, sure, but you're going to struggle to find damage against this Incineroar. I think the best thing that Wolfe can do here is just play out this turn, make sure that he can get his other Pokemon positioned once that Groudon's Dynamax is over, and then, you know, maybe sneak in an attack boost here, too, for this Lunala.
Those Max Quake boosts were pivotal for this Groudon because that was a G-Max Wild. That's Charizard, Gabby. All we talk about is how much damage it does, and Groudon didn't even care.
Hey, that just goes to show you. I'm pretty sure we can confirm that's an Assault Vest at this point. I mean, it just seems like even with the Max Quake special defense boost, it just seems right.
And with the Meteor Beam on that turn from Lunala, that's the Rock Attack, will be super effective into Incineroar and knocking it out. So Santino is now out of Intimidates in this game. The Rockfall will take down Charizard here for Wolfe, so he has lost that Charizard, still has Incineroar, and then presumably Groudon as the 4th Pokemon on his side.
I think this is exactly when you want Charizard to go down, though. I mean, it's going to be difficult for you to get the weather set up again, barring another knockout. And at least if the Charizard is the one knocked out, you can still take advantage of the Moongeist Beam and the special attack boost on this Lunala, and you can get your own Groudon in a situation where I think it's probably going to be faster, like we saw earlier, and you can get that damage down. And, you know, I think Wolfe is very smart by making sure that the Intimidate comes out before that Pokemon, but we see another adjustment here from Santino. It's going to be a late game Grimmsnarl, which didn't quite work out for him in game 1, but now we're at a completely different board state in game 3.
Right, there's no fake out G-Max Wildfire access on this turn, and Santino, you know, heeding your advice, leaving Venusaur in the back. He doesn't need it for game 3.
No, you really don't need it. I think the threat of bringing the Sleep Powder alone is probably enough for the Venusaur for this matchup. But Santino, you know, still has to worry about fake out from that Incineroar here, but Lunala is at such low health. It's possible that Lunala, you know, I think Wolfe has to try and go for the Trick Room here, and I think seeing the fake out into Groudon, interesting.
Yep,
Very
so
interesting.
The fake out goes into the Groudon slot, meaning you won't be able to attack this turn. Obviously, you can't fake out the, or I guess you could have faked out the Grimmsnarl there if you wanted to, but he doesn't go for any screens. He goes for a foul play instead, which is ineffective into the Incineroar slot.
Possibly trying to catch a switch in from Wolfe's Groudon, but that turn was very, very strange. And I think what we saw play out was actually these trainers just out-predicting each other a bit too far. I think that the Moongeist Beam and the damage down on the Groudon was really important for Wolfe, as now that it's just the Calyrex Shadow Rider and the Grimmsnarl on the field for Santino, and relatively speaking, Wolfe's Incineroar is very healthy. I think this is the great opportunity for him to capitalize on that. It's just unfortunate that this Lunala most likely is going to go down this turn as a result. You know, seeing the foul play on the Grimmsnarl as well is very curious to me, and I think Santino was avoiding the knockout on the Lunala that previous turn so that this Calyrex could possibly try and use it for a special attack boost. But what is going on?
So Throat Chop goes into Calyrex's Protect here, so he doesn't get that damage. And Lunala gets the Trick Room
There
up.
it is.
So the foul play just keeps going towards that Incineroar, but now with the Twisted Dimensions, the Calyrex is really slow. And I know when it switched in, its name is Calyrex, the well-trained, but it's going to need to be really well-trained to survive against this Lunala Incineroar.
I think that Santino was trying to get enough chip damage down on the Incineroar that a Astral Barrage would have just knocked it outright. And unfortunately for Santino, by being forced to target the Incineroar in that way, the Lunala was given the freedom to go for Trick Room that past turn. And I think that was a great prediction by Wolfe, just recognizing that now that Calyrex is really the only Pokemon on Santino's side of the field that can attack at this point in time, setting up Trick Room means that you're guaranteed to go first and you're guaranteed to find that knockout. I still want to know more about this Grimmsnarl though, because, you know, Foul Play isn't the most popular move right now on Grimmsnarl, and gives it some interesting options against Wolfe's remaining physical attackers. I also am wondering if it's running anything that could help.
Wait, is he going to scary face
Yeah,
his own
he
Calyrex?
did.
Okay, so Santino just lowered his speed on his
but it
Calyrex,
wasn't
but it wasn't enough. That would have been so
Oh.
cool. That would have been so cool if the Calyrex was then slower because of Trick Room. A plus for effort on that play, Santino. Unfortunately, it did not work out for you, and Wolfe is going to win this set, but that was so cool.
Again, this Grimmsnarl is a very unique type of Grimmsnarl, and I would love to see more of what it has to bring to the table. But for now, I think Santino